We're live.
You're live.
Hello, everyone, and to everyone that will join eventually. This is a fancier setup, and it's a Tuesday rather than a Wednesday, but welcome to Whiskey Wednesday either way. Today we're going to be featuring stuff from the Lakes Distillery and a new feature, or a new whiskey and a new release that they've sent me in the post. We don't get a lot of stuff sent to us in the post, and this was quite a pleasant surprise to get on a Monday morning. We did the original Lakes whiskey, or their first public release single malt, like November, maybe October time last year. I had a much bigger beard and much more hair, so the video might look a little bit different. But in that video, we said we would go back and assess the whiskey. And instead of just reviewing number 3, which is in this little sample bottle, we're going to go back through number 1, see how it's changed, see how it's developed, talk about the Lakes Distillery a little bit, and then we'll move into whiskey number 3, which is pre-poured. And as we go through, we're just going to talk about flavour, talk about the distillery, talk about how things are developing for what is my local whiskey distillery. There are gin distilleries and rum distilleries in the area, but no one as to this point is creating whiskey apart from the Lakes Distillery up in the Lake District. So, whiskey number 1, and the bottle itself, even though this number 3 is only in a little sample bottle, the bottle it will come in and is currently for sale for looks just like this. This big quadrifoil based, beautifully presented, very heavy glass bottle. Very elegant. You can see like the Macallan influences that have come through it and a few others. The master distiller himself used to work for Macallan, so there's some very elegant and beautiful cask influences to talk about with these whiskies. But that's what they look like. They're quite the showstopper. All the whiskies are cask strength. All the whiskies are natural colour. All the whiskies are non-chill filtered. So at around £60 a bottle, there's not much to complain about. That's a lot of good value in something which is made within England, which is a growing whiskey product within itself. Still trying to find out what it's doing in the same way that Starwood in Australia is still trying to like pinpoint what Australian whiskey is. I feel like the Lakes are doing it better than pretty much every other distillery in England right now. But first release number 1, 60.6% ABV. No water has been applied to this at all. We're going to drink it neat. The distillery itself started in 2011, and it's just gone from strength to strength, from gins to blends, vodkas, liqueurs, trying to keep themselves going, releasing products until the whiskey itself was ready. It was ready last year, and as we've said, we're now on the 3rd release. I didn't get a bottle of number 2. Number 2 didn't really sit right with me. I didn't like the flavour profile. But 1, and when we tried 3, really seemed to work for me quite a bit. So we'll see what's going on. But in terms of facts and statistics, I believe this is a combination of American, French, and Spanish oak, Oloroso sherry, Pedro Jimenez sherry, along with red wine seasoning casks. That's a lot of flavour, and you can really see that Highland, Macallan, Aberlour influence coming over. To talk about PX sherry as a regular introduction to a product, which is only around £60 at cask strength. Not that common. Glendronach does a similar thing with their cask strength release, but it's not something you see a lot of. So in terms of smelling, the whiskey is punchy. That 60.6% hasn't changed a lot, and as you can see from the bottle, it's about the same in terms of depth as when we actually reviewed it. Obviously, quarantine has only just ended for a lot of retailers. This has been in the shop for the last 3 months, so it's not been touched, unfortunately. But in terms of the nose, for those of you that have ever had those like Haribo cherry sweets and those kind of like fake lip sweets they make, it's all about that. Big strawberry, big cherry. And then it gets heavier as you dive into it, like honey, loads of figs, like kind of rich tropical orchid fruits. I feel kind of bad because the gentleman helping me with this live stream, I've not given any of the whiskey to them. So it's just I'm kind of teasing them a little bit with this. But regardless, they will get some at the end of it. Don't you worry about that. Because it's quite a full bottle, as you can see. So a wonderfully luscious nose. Not too different from when we first smelt it around about 6 months ago. 8 months ago. Taste-wise, it is forward, it is spicy. Natural cask strength whiskies are naturally. So yeah, I'll try not to use the word naturally for the rest of this. It was twice in one sentence. But those big manuka, honey, heavy molasses flavours still kick through. It almost has like an old rum quality to it. Loads of brown sugar, Very, very intense. And it just matches up to everything beautifully. I made a point of saying I thought this whiskey was about 6 years old when the original video came out. I was then corrected, thank Christ, because it's best to be corrected. 4 to 5, roughly around that 4 mark. But for something that's so young, and I think it takes a lot of balls as a distillery to release something that's so young at cash strength, matured in the north of England, which isn't known for its sunny climate in any way, and to get the amount of flavour they're getting out of this, and to just say, as a standard product, we're going to give you natural colour, known filtering, and cash strength, that's pretty brave. It's like when you see single cask whiskies that have a number 5 on them, or even sometimes like a 6 or a 7. There's no hiding behind a fancy label, it just is what it is. Yes, it is a non-age statement, but in the grand scheme, I don't think that really matters for a distillery that was only established 9 years ago. It lingers, it's peppery spice, it's almost like fireworks going off. It really kind of lingers down the back in this part of your throat. But even then, there's so many kind of rich, unctuous flavours. There's still loads of toffee and like cream fudge. It's almost kind of British in its flavour profile. I know that sounds quite unusual, but we've said strawberries, fudge, toffee. I know those are applicable to a lot of whiskies, but for an English product matured mainly in European oak from sherry and red wine, it's getting some wonderful kind of summery English flavours, which is quite a feat these days. Because if something's matured in sherry, we always say raisins and sultana and Christmas cake, and I think most of the people in the whiskey industry are getting a little bit bored of those notes. I believe number 1 is now sold out. Something that was quite hard to get initially, flew off the shelves for drinkers and collectors. I'm all about drinking your whiskey or saving it for a very good occasion if you spent a lot of money on something. I opened this, it's become even more delicious sat in quarantine, so this will be coming home with me tonight and it can finally be added to the collection. So that's whiskey 1. That's the reassessment. That's getting us all into the mind frame and the space of what the Lakes Distillery is. Cash strength releases, all natural colour, all those wonderful organic flavour profiles. European oak, it's spicy, it's intense. It's not as easy to work with as American oak can be, but then again, barrels are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Barrels are very difficult to work with in themselves. They're kind of like the one part we can't control. Some of them work very well, some of them work okay, sometimes they just don't. There's many factors that the whiskey industry can't control around those barrels, as much as we try. So I'm going to put this down. And then here is the third release. You have to pardon the branding on the glass, I couldn't find a blank one. Some things are similar, some things are quite different. Now, I haven't seen the full-size bottle of this yet because I haven't got it into the shop. I've seen it on a couple of websites. On number 1 and number 2, it did say cash strength on it. The sample I've received in the post does not. It just says 54%. So at the minute, I don't know if that is cash strength or if it just worked at its best at 54% ABV. We can get a little bit hung up on that word. Cash strength, we want it to be natural, we want it to be as organic as possible. But the key thing is releasing a whiskey where the ABV works for you as a drinker. Because it may not work at 53, it may be awful at 55, but it could be spot on the money at 54. But at the minute, I'm unsure if this is cash strength because I haven't seen any official labelling. For those of you that have a bottle, I know some of you received a full bottle in the post from your orders, is it cash strength? Let us know in the comments, we can kind of rest assured then. The main thing that is different is that there's no American oak in this whiskey. It's only French and Spanish oak, unlike number 1, which did contain some American oak. It's still Oloroso, it's still Pedro Jimenez, it's still red wine. They've not stated if the red wine is from France or Spain, but either way you're in for a winner, because Spanish red wine's great, French red wine's great. But the key thing that was different and that caught me out was that it uses cream sherry barrels. And pardon my accent, but that's cream sherry, C-R-E-A-M, not green, but cream sherry. And what that is, it's a blending of 2 different types of sherry. So if you've ever gone round to your grand's house and she's had a bottle of sherry, it's either going to be Oloroso, which is the mostly used sherry in the world, or cream, which is more affordable. The bottles tend to be cheaper. Doesn't mean that the barrels that they've stored in are not, because sherry is expensive to buy, whether it's in a barrel or even like when you want to kind of buy shares in a bodega, it's always going to be quite expensive. So the cream sherry kind of pulled me in. I was like, The only people I know to use cream sherry before are Bunnahabhain on some very old releases. I think it was a 32-year-old or a 33-year-old. So that instantly caught my attention because all those whiskies, or the one whiskey that's used in the past, has been very much out of my price range. So that's already very different. But in terms of the smell, the first one is honey and figs. This leans much more into that heavy fruit category, which if you're a long-time subscriber to this channel, since I've been involved with it, I love those tropical fruit heavy whiskies. Loads of pineapple, kiwi, apple, pears, lemon. If it has that, it's instantly already a winner for me. And this has got it in spade loads. It's like loads of toffee, pineapple, brown sugar sauce, like toffee sauce. Some of you might be thinking, is there a peated release? I'm unsure if they've ever done peated whiskey, because at the minute all these tasting notes and smelling notes, they're coming across as quite sweet. I guarantee they've probably peated some product. As a distillery, you definitely would. But for the minute, no smoke, so apologies to you smokeheads who might be watching, because it's not something they've done yet. But keep your eyes open, you never know. But yeah, think summertime barbecue, but you're throwing fruit on the barbecue. It's toffeed and it's caramelized and it's rich and delicious. And then there's still elements of that figgy, honey, almost classic distillery style. I remember trying the One, which is their house blend, for want of a better phrase. And the first time I tried it at a training session, it just had these big tropical fruit notes in it. And I think for a local English distillery, going something that's very heavy on smoke straight away is very divisive. Some people love, some people hate, but going for that softer, fruitier summertime product, which is a running theme, seems to be something good for them. And to smell it in this, to smell it in number one, and within their house blend, means that there is a consistency of that house style. I haven't tried this yet, only smelt it, so the taste is brand new to me. It was got like a huge waft of mango off the top of it. So 54%, 6.6% lower than the first one. I can't remember the ABV of number two. If any of you have it, by all means stick it in the comments. I remember number two being very spicy. It came across as very intense, slightly dark chocolate, bitter flavours, which I do like, but for some reason it just threw me off a little bit. I wasn't expecting it as much. But the taste of number three, the all-important part. Even though it's 6% less in ABV, you can tell the ABV has already affected me. The intensity and how it lingers around is something to write home about. Now you can say that about young whiskey, it's easy to do. Because if you have something that's very punchy, high ABV, with a lot of wood influences, you could say that it's just the most extreme profile. But to have it as a consistency through three different products is something they're obviously aiming for. And until a 10-year-old comes out, or a 12, I think to have these young, punchy, fiery whiskies, there's something that goes down quite well with this channel, along with a lot of people who view it. Think about Lagavulin 8-year-old, Lagavulin 12-year-old at cash strength. Most of us fell in love with that. Younger Glen Scotias. You bourbon fans know that most of it's 6 to 8 years old, so it's going to come out of these big, woody profiles. As lovely as the spices, those tropical fruits from the nose still kick around on the palate. Mangoes, pineapples, limes, lemons, just full of loads of rich, lovely fruits. The initial texture is much gentler, whereas number one has this kind of like firework, peppercorn, really intense spicy pepper flavour to it. Initially, this one is fruitier, lighter, and then it's only as you swallow it, the real intensity of the ABV and the barrel influences come in. Trying to pick out the red wine flavours, it's slightly tannic towards the back, it's a little bit drier. You could argue maybe it's like Rioja wine because that pepperiness is lovely and bold. But as you dive into it and you undercut all these different flavours, you really can try and balance out all the cask influences. So PX sherry is rich and sweet, those mangoes, all those kind of lovely luscious styles. Oloroso, a little bit drier, more kind of classic raisins, sherry. I know we said we wouldn't say that, but it's kind of impossible to get there. And then Spanish oak, French oak, European oak as a whole with Macallan. Despite Macallan's pricing and whatever you may think of it, they do make very good whiskey. Craigellachie is something that's always been funky and different and alive and fresh. And I feel like the Lakes Distillery have paid attention to that, and they've gone ahead with that profile of whiskey flavour because it's what people enjoy. And for this tiny distillery that's barely a decade old to reach out and get really expensive PX casks, really expensive Oloroso casks, red wine, French oak, European oak, and not necessarily brush aside American oak, because that is impossible to do. I guarantee they've got loads of barrels maturing in American oak. But to throw such expensive, high-profile products or close to natural strength whiskey, I think you've got to like commend them for that. And as we said at the start, I came in on Monday morning to do some paperwork, just go to the bank, and this wonderful little parcel turned up. And we thought a great way to show this off would be to compare it with number one, test some really cool new equipment, which is what we're doing, and hopefully it's going down well for you. But comparing that to other distilleries, things like Daft Mill, we do move into Scotland at this point. Ardnahoe with a £1 million price tag of a barrel. Daft Mill being, even at retail price, impossible to get hold of. And then you've got these guys who are making deliciously rich, almost like classic Speyside Highland whiskey for a fraction of the price of that. And I'm kind of proud to call that a local product. It's not really local to me. Like if it was within 10 miles, then it's super local. But to be within the northwest of England and to be something that is readily available, even with only a couple of thousand bottles produced at £60, I think is quite incredible. So I think all commendation to Lakes Distillery, their master distiller, where it's available if you can get hold of the bottle, because they do sell out quite quickly. It's just fresh and elegant, welcoming, but still with loads of flavour. Normally we'd add a little bit of water to a cask strength product. Obviously in a live stream, I forgot to kind of get any water, so we won't do that. But it's not a bad thing, because at this point I'm really enjoying it as it is. And if I can try and get that glass kind of steady, the way it holds the glass is quite incredible. The syrupy kind of elements to the legs on that, just falling down really slowly, letting you see all those natural oils, all those natural flavours just kind of linger down the side of it. Turns a regular glass into like a stained glass window. But yeah, the Lakes Distillery, it's release number 1 and release number 3. Should think of scores really, shouldn't we? Or if any of you do have any questions in the comment section, feel free to reach out to us, because there is a little bit more to talk about with these. Mainly if any of you have had other good experiences of English whiskies. I know it's somewhat of an on-trend thing right now. Gulliver's are releasing a load of stuff. Obviously the number 3 release of this has come out. The English distillery in Norfolk, they've released like an 11-year-old and a few other things, and they're getting to like really not ripe ages, but ages which are much more common, much more consistent with what we want to see as a regular product. So if you've had any experiences, good or bad, of English whiskey, let us know. It's something that has... Apologies, I just got like a smell of it then and had to taste it again. But it's something that is growing, but I think there's only 15, maybe 17, maximum maybe 20 distilleries in all of England itself. Obviously Scotland, there's a couple of hundred. Wales, there is 3, I believe. So English whiskey itself, I thought, has had a bit of a studded path, like a bit of a difficult start to life. There's one in Cornwall, and its name I always forget. It's called like Helix or Healy or something like that. And they've released one bottle of whiskey, and it was very, very expensive. I think it was a couple of £1,000s a bottle, maybe like high hundreds at least. And I remember thinking, well, that's not a great way to introduce English whiskey to someone. It's like telling someone the greatest whiskey in the world is Macallan 25, and then they see the price tag and think, I can't attain that. And then the English distillery company started up in Norfolk. An unusual place to start whiskey, for sure. Very flat land, not kind of known for its water sources or anything. But they've gone from strength to strength with peated styles, unpeated styles, cask influences, very broad, from your classic port and sherries all the way through to exuberant wines and virgin oaks and all these kind of unusual things. And then these guys come along and they literally say, we're going to wait. We're going to wait for at least that 6-year point before we release anything that's we think good enough, which is awesome. Daffnell waited to 12 years. That's how much they wanted to just kind of wait and to like show off to the world a little bit. Like, we could make very good whiskey. I apologise for all the other English distilleries that I can't remember. We've got enough emails from them to stock products, but they're just kind of escaping my mind right now. But yeah, do let us know if you've had good and or bad experiences at all with English whiskey.
Got one question, Phil.
We have a question? Yeah?
We have a question for Steve Davidson.
Hello, Steve.
What's the most tropical draft you have tried?
This is going to really contradict my point now, because the most tropical whiskey I've ever tried was Hakushu 25-year-old, which I think just got best Japanese whiskey in the world again at the tail end of last year. It smells incredible. It's like cutting open fresh pineapple and fresh pears, but it will set you back about £3,000. So, good side, bad side. I think when this shop first opened 6 years ago, we had a bottle in that very cabinet for about £1,000, like literally just under, and now it's treble its price. So Hakushu 25's up there. You can get loads of tropical flavours with loads of bourbon. I know not everyone's into bourbon. It's a shame, but it just means there's more for me. But even more familiar distilleries like Bow Blair, the 12 and the 15 are jam-packed with like pineapple and mango and lemon and lime. Benriac's a great one too. And even things like the Benromac batch strengths, even more mellow whiskies like Auchentoshan. Yeah, the most tropical thing ever was Hakushu 25. But I can't afford to buy that. And I got to try a little bit of it and it was delicious. And I kind of like linger that flavour in the back of my mind forever until it drops in price, which it probably sadly will never do. But thank you for that question, Steve. That's a pretty good question. How many are actually watching?
We have 21.
21's pretty good. I think that's the most we've ever had in any live session for me on Whiskey Wednesday.
We can live with that.
We'll take 21. Thank you all 21 for joining us. Do any of you own anything from the Lakes Distillery? I think that's a pretty important point, as this is a focal on them. So do you own the blend? Do you own the vodkas or the gins? Have you owned batch 1? Have you owned batch 2 or batch 3? Have you got all 3? Did you receive a sample in the post like I did? Are you viewed as somewhat as an influencer, even though I hate that word, but I suppose they send you these samples for a reason. I'm just going to put the bottle up again, because there's quite a lot to see on the bottle. As we've said, this isn't the number 3 bottle, it's the number 1 bottle, as you'll see on the label. I get asked a lot of questions. Obviously, the shop has reopened again. We've been open for about a week, well, it's not post-COVID, because it's still a thing, but post-quarantine, or lockdown, I suppose you could say in England. And when we received the sample on Monday, literally yesterday, I thought to myself, I've not looked at this whiskey for a while, and when you pick it out of its box, and its box is as elegant and simple as it can be, it just says everything you want to see on the front of it. But obviously you guys can't feel the weight of this through there, but it's quite a hefty bottle. Like this, it's probably one of the heavier bottles you can get. The glass bottom is so thick on it. The labels are just very well executed. We don't talk about design a lot on this show. If we do, it's quite passing comments. But even if I spin it round, you know, the bottle numbers, the amount produced, Mr. Gandhi's signature on the bottom of it. Simple, plain, elegant, taking things out of the Macallan rulebook a little bit, and just making things very simple to understand. We've mentioned in the past that there's a lot of jargon going around with whiskey. How many different ways can you say the word oak or wood on a bottle? Lord knows everyone tries. American oak, bourbon oak, ex-American oak, all these kind of things. But I just love the elegant simplicity of this. And if I kind of move it up like that, you'll see that quadrifold base and how thick the glass is on that. The gentleman who is the sales manager for this whiskey, and this brand in fact, used to be my original boss in this shop. He actually hired me. I wasn't his first choice, but I won't hold that against him. I was his second choice, but eventually here I am now, still working here. And he actually dropped by, I think just before this whiskey launched last year, for a little tasting session with the blend, some cocktails and stuff. And he was talking to me about how much effort goes into a brand who designs the label, a different brand who designs the bottle, another brand who designs the box and this little brass bit and the cork and all sorts of things. You'd think one company would do all of that. But just to nail all that together in some amazing presentation, again for about 60 quid a bottle, from numerous different companies with all these natural assets to it. I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch for the Lakes Distillery, but it is just something that a lot of the brands really aren't doing. Certainly not for that price point anyway. You think about limited edition Macallans in very fancy bottles, or limited edition Glendronachs even for in nice kind of presentation cases. I'm trying to think of other things that have got quite weighty glass to them. Dalmore's, if you want a 50-year-old, that's £50,000. I'm not saying that the Lakes Distillery's 50-year-old won't be that expensive. If the whiskey's this good at 6 years old, it could be worth 50 grand in the future. But I think in terms of how this is laid out and when you can get it, because this particular bottle is bottle 1409 of 5922, that's not a lot. I'm trying to put the maths together in my head. That's maybe what, 30 barrels, maybe a little bit more. Mainly UK release. I don't know how much of it got into Northern Europe or over to America without special deliveries anyway. But yeah, just a beautiful thing to look at, a beautiful thing to drink, and it's nice to be able to call it, an English whiskey, because we talk about Scottish whiskey most of the time. Talk about Irish whiskey. It's growing and growing and growing. The strongest growing whiskey style since the 1990s, Irish whiskey. It's just a behemoth, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But to talk about English whiskey, this is now the only distillery I really think about. So the key thing that comes to my mind is the Lakes.
One more question, Phil.
Oh, we've got another question? Go for it.
So Craig, he says both the English Whiskey Co. and the Lakes have dropped their typically English design. St George on the Norfolk one and Union Jack on the Lakes one. So
Yeah.
why do you think this is?
That could be a very politically charged question. Let's pick up a glass again. There's loads of flies in the room, so I don't want flies to land in my glass. Yeah, I think when you put a flag on something that's very bold, because the Lakes Distillery did have a giant Union Jack across the front of it. I use the word giant, it's a regular bottle size, but quite large for the label. And then the Norfolk Distillery, the English whiskey company, they had St George with the horse and the flag, it was on a pole and everything. Very Crusader vibes from it. And I think a lot of people might not understand the profile of that or what it's trying to be. Certainly people in this country will, for either good or bad reasons. I think to use flags on bottles these days can be a bit of a dangerous situation depending on where the product's produced and what ideas it's coming across. To use a little bit of a contrast, there's a bourbon called Rebel Yell, and that used to have a gentleman on the front of it whose name I can't remember, but he used to be kind of waving the Confederate flag around, and that I think got faded out 5 or 6 years ago, roughly. So obviously that has connotations to it that you don't want to associate with a brand. It's like a marketing, because you're going to divide people that way. So I think, obviously I'm not a spokesperson for either one of those distilleries. I want to make that quite clear. This is just a personal thing. But I think to move away from patriarchal images to create a broader, cleaner design platform is a way to make your product more well-known. Arguably, it should always be done through taste, and this distillery in particular nails that very well. But I would go with that. I think taking away the idea of patriarchy, some people can view it as a little bit of a cheesy gimmick, plastering flags on things, very touristy. To move to just a cleaner design, and the new St George's whiskey, which is an 11-year-old, it's just this beautiful kind of yellow colour scheme, yellow label, just a nice gold 11 in the front of it. That makes me attracted to that bottle. I was never personally a fan of the St George thing on the front of it. I looked at it and kind of thought it might be made for a nicher audience. But as an encompassing point, I would say it's probably just to clean up the marketing side a little bit, to make it more expressive to people who pick it up and go, oh, I've never seen this before. And you start a conversation in retail by going, oh, well, this is English. And then that produces an idea about what kind of stills do they use, what kind of barrels are they using, and the same as the Scottish, the same as the Irish. So it's a very good question. Craig, thank you for the question. But yeah, I think it's just to clean up branding a little bit, to make things a little bit more aerodynamic, for want of a better phrase.
Do you want to run the competition?
Mm.
Right, so we're going to run a VT. Stand by.
Hold on, introduce.
We're going to run a little bit of a video now.
It's only very quick though, it's like 5 seconds long.
It's a 5-second video, but Barmies, we're going to run it, and one of you will have the wonderful opportunity to win this product. I've not seen this video. I'll make that clear.
Okay, you like it?
So I haven't seen that video that was just rolled, but I know what the prize is. So if any of you do want to win it, I think we're just going to pull out a name at random, right? Just kind of randomly select someone in the chat.
Yeah, just put in the chat, I want this.
Yeah, if you write that and you want that, I will happily send it to you in the post, because I have
And why have we chose that prize?
Why we chose that in particular? I have 2 of them going spare, and during lockdown, one of them was used for security in the front of the window, and it seemed to work quite well. Whereas the other one, I don't want to throw away. One of you might be a fan of his, one of you might like his product. But either way, it's yours if you want it. So if you want it, let us know in the chat, and I will happily send it to you with a nice letter attached as well. Maybe a sample of the whiskey, because I have an open bottle of it and it's not going anywhere anytime quick. So just let us know.
And what happened to the review of Proper 12 when we did that?
Ah, yeah. Moving to Irish whiskey briefly. We were chatting about Proper 12. Obviously, this setup's quite new for us. The only live streams we've done before have been from my bedroom on a not particularly good phone camera with some questionable wallpaper in the background. But when we've been setting this up today, or as I've been kind of stood there going, this is all really expensive, I don't know what to do, we were chatting about the Proper 12 video, and we were arguing we were going to put like segues into funny videos just to keep you guys entertained for this period. And for those of you that have not watched the Proper 12 video, I would encourage you to go and watch it, because there are comedy elements to it and we tried to make it funny, but there is an overall serious point to what I was trying to make in that video. How Irish whiskey is growing and becoming so much more popular now. And I think in all whiskey in general, for celebrities to step in, I think it gets a little bit muddy, for want of a better phrase. Matthew McConaughey with Wild Turkey, Mila Kunis with Jim Beam. They are just advertising. I know they take on roles like creative director and stuff like that. But I think you should just leave that to people who've got degrees in it and know what they're doing, and in terms of marketing and stuff. I don't think bringing a celebrity on board really does much for a whiskey. That's a personal point. The sales figures of Hay Club and Proper 12 totally go against that. But I would argue that those products were designed to target a very specific audience, fans of that celebrity. But if you watch the Proper 12 video, please do. It was meant to be slightly tongue-in-cheek, although if you read through the comments section, there are some very serious comments from myself and people across the world. Make of them whatever you will in your own personal space. But give it a go. If you are a fan of him and his sport, fair play to you. I don't know much about the bloke. Just didn't like his whiskey that much. But we're giving away this cardboard cutout because I've got 2 of them. I don't really want to throw it away. One of you might want it. You might be a fan. But yeah, check it out either way and we'll see what you all think.
I think we're going to have like a 2-minute break.
Yeah.
We'll just go dark.
Yeah, sure.
We'll have a 2-minute break.
It is a life-size cardboard cutout too. He's about this big. So he's about the same height as me, about 5'8"-ish, give or take. But we're just going to go to a little break. It's going to go black, but we'll be back very soon, so about 2 minutes time.
just tilt it back again, so it's not too much in the light. That's it.
Okay, we're back. Our friend has joined us. As we were discussing off air, I'm pretty sure we can do this. This seems normal. We should be allowed to do this. It's not a problem, right? You have the opportunity to win this in the most simplistic way possible. What you do with it in your own home is your decision. But you want to keep out burglars or something, or I don't know, like a scarecrow for the back garden, something like that. It should be fine. I'm just going to slowly move him out. He does require a little bit of manhandling, so you have to do that on your own. But we're back. Thank you all for kind of taking part in the comments and making this a bit fun, because this is a test run of something. We're just trying to make sure that it's all going well and fun for everyone to do. So just one more look at that bottle, and then we'll begin to kind of slowly wrap it up. But if you are a fan of this distillery, wonderful. Welcome to the club. I'm part of it too. It's nice to see this thing grown over what is nearly a decade. So to have this available now, to have it fully functional as a single malt distillery rather than a blend producer and a gin and a vodka, it's something to be quite proud of. And it's nice to see something like this grow, because whiskey fans, if you're a Macallan fan, if you're a Glendronach fan, a Buffalo Trace fan, no matter what you love that's from around the world in whiskey, we've kind of walked into these distilleries already existing, already producing amazing whiskey, making people like myself, reviewers, fully aware of their brand and what they do and what their kind of mission statement as products are. Sorry for those kind of influencer words there, but that's what they are. I've been along all years old, but it is their 10th anniversary next year, so could be a limited release 10-year-old or something. Don't quote me on that. I don't know, but I imagine they might release something that is our first barrels, first distillate, that kind of stuff. But it's nice to see it grow. It's nice to see it become an adult product, really. Pretty fun. This is all that remains of the little sample. I'll give this to the guys behind the cameras and who are kind of making all this function, because without them you wouldn't have this stuff. What you can't see behind the cameras is some ridiculous equipment, many cables, many things like that. But this will be divided between Ed and Alex, and they can go home and see what they think of that for their local whiskey distillery too. Bottled on the 19th of June, so 3 days after my birthday, so good month that, good date. Just gotta give you guys a bit of a focus of that. And we're approaching maybe like the 45-minute mark, so I've kind of run out of things to say. We've tried the whiskey, it all good's good. But if you do have any more questions, let us know. I can answer whatever you need within reason. And we can see if you do have any more questions going at all.
So nobody has asked any questions. Nobody has applied to win the life-size Connor.
No one.
So
kind of normal.
I guess we can call it a day.
Well, that's fine. If none of you wanted to win it, I can kind of understand why. You can be additional security. I've got 2 of them, so it's just like having 2 bouncers at the door. But the main thing is humour and Mr. McGregor to one side. It was all about this stuff. It was all about the lakes. So for the 20 plus of you that joined us, thank you so much. This was a little bit of just a concept at the start, and we're happy to see it all running. This is hopefully something we'll be doing more of, and as a result we can get brands in, maybe get like ambassadors in, do some interviews, do some chats that are live, and then you guys can ask questions in general. Lord knows I know enough brand ambassadors to get people involved with this, so we can talk about brands, and if you have any brands that you want us to interview, stick them forward. I'm sure I can get in touch with someone and do like a little post Whiskey Wednesday interview or something like that. I'm sure that'd be quite good.
So one question, Phil.
Oh, one more. Go on.
So he says, what do you think, Welsh Toro,
Oh yeah.
what do you think of the Ben Romac
Yep.
redesign?
The Ben Romac redesign. This is going to get a little bit out of focus while I grab the old Ben Romac bottle, so just bear with me. Ugh, if I can get that in focus on the camera.
Nigel Waxaff says, score please.
Oh, the score for the whiskey, yes. For batch 3, we gave batch 1, I think we gave it an 8, possibly an 8.5. I'm going to roll with 8 for 3 as well. I think number 1 of anything is always directly very impressive, especially if you like it. 8 is lovely. I'd argue it's maybe a little bit... Sorry, number 3 is lovely. I'd argue it's probably a little bit too mellow in comparison. but the whiskey's older, it's lower ABV. But number 3 from the Lakes gets a solid 8 from me. So thank you for that question, Nigel, because I totally forgot about the score. In regards to the Ben Romack redesign, I don't have the new stuff yet, but this is the old one, and it's kind of renowned for its Tipex logo. I love this old design, and it was something that caught my eye because we never used to stock this in this shop. It's a relatively new product for us in the grand scheme of everything. This is the classic 10-year-old. The new one is now like a flush white label with red block lettering. It's almost very Bal Blair-like. I can see why they've done it, because from one person to another, their international market got a little bit confused by the font of this text, and they didn't really know what it was. Which in my mind, as a retailer, strikes up again a conversation. You can start chatting to someone about something. In terms of the new design, I can see why they've done it, but I do prefer the classic style. I think it's very eye-catching. By all means, if you haven't seen the new Ben Romack design, just Google it. I think Whiskey Exchange have got it as one of their main headers on their website too. But if it was me, I would have kept the old design. But I can see why they've changed it. As long as the liquid inside the bottle is as good as this stuff is, and this is very good, it should all be fine. But I suppose we all have to deal with changing labels and changing faces and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a shame. It really is. Thank you for that question, Welsh, because you've always got good questions. But yeah, I prefer the old one to round that comment up.
Josh Greenwood says, nice video, thanks team, cheers.
By all means, the team behind the camera, you've not seen Ed, you've probably met Ed before on certain videos. And Alex as well is relatively new to me, but this has all been a mind-opening situation. But if that's it for questions.
I think it is. I think we're good.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Thank you all for watching. We'll be doing more of this, and it's just going to be good. So if you do have any brand ambassador questions, get to me on Twitter. That's just WhiskeyTube, @WhiskeyTube. And if a particular brand comes up a lot, we'll try and get them in. We'll try and chat. In the current situation, it might be 2 meters apart with face masks and stuff, but I'm sure we can deal with that. But either way, this is going to be something we're going to be doing more of, probably on a Tuesday rather than a Wednesday. But by all means, thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your nights, and we'll see you all soon.
Are we putting this out?